Hi, my name is Martin Purnell, and welcome to Off-Grid Christianity, a weekly podcast for those who go or don't go to church and where we can meet and hear from those that have made their faith count. This podcast series is to encourage via conversation, and you can contact us as well by email, ogc@accessradio.biz, and biz is spelled B-I-Z. Today's guest, who is he? Well, he was part of the BBC Development Executive full-time for 8 years, and he is known as the undercover theologian on Radio 2. His writing skills include contributions to The Guardian and Private Eye, and of course books, one of which, Bleeding for Jesus, was the basis for a 2-part documentary on Channel 4 that garnered a recent BAFTA award. Our guest has been chair or trustee for Christian Trusts and has a healthy following on social media. He is a lecturer and is an academic theologian and is very interested in the communication of theology. In his spare time, he is a follower of Stockport County FC, a haunt of my team in the past. I've never seen us win there. What has he learned about communication of theology, and if he could change anything, what would it be in his genre? How important is humour, which he uses on social media, within communication of theology? His stories in his book Faith, Hope and Mischief, Tiny Acts of Rebellion by an Everyday Activist, encourage those that read this book to take risks. A man after my own heart. What is an everyday activist? All these questions. Can we fit all the answers into an hour? It gives me great pleasure to welcome today Andrew Graystone. Andrew, thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you also for a lovely little chat beforehand. So much to learn from you. For those that know nothing about you, first of all, apart from the fact they might think, oh, he's somewhere in Stockport. Where are you living currently?
I live in Manchester, just south of the centre of Manchester, where God lives, and been here for nearly 30 years now, although I grew up in South London.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Whereabouts?
Croydon. I'm a Croydon boy.
The home of the damned, of course, if you're into music.
Yeah.
You didn't by chance see them, did you, down in Croydon?
No, I didn't see the Damned, almost home of Crystal Palace Football Club, who when I was down there, they never did what they're doing now. Amazing club.
Especially if you can try and find it on a wet Wednesday evening, as I tried to.
Yes, it's not exactly central to Croydon, but it is our team.
Right, well, let's go for it then. 5 important questions, or maybe not so. Question number 1. Who is your favourite biblical character or favourite biblical story or favourite parable, please, good sir?
That's very easy. My favourite biblical character is Eutychus. Now, Eutychus has a very small walk-on part in the Bible. He crops up in Acts chapter 20. We know that he was a young man, and we know that he went to church to hear Paul speak. And the crowd was so big that the only place he could find to sit was on a windowsill. And Paul went on and on and on with his sermon so long, and it was hot in there, the Bible tells us. And Paul went on so long that Eutychus fell asleep, fell out of the window and died. We also know what happened next, which was that Paul stopped the service, stopped preaching, went outside, found Eutychus and prayed for him, and he came alive again. So Eutychus, for me, stands for all those people, and I know thousands of them, who have been preached to death in the church, who were so bored by the way that the church was communicating that they fell asleep and died. And the lesson for us, for me, is that Paul stopped the service and went outside. So my goal in life has been to stop the church service and go outside to where we find all the people who've been preached to death and see whether we can breathe life back into them. That's why Eutychus is my favourite Bible character. I bet you've never even heard of him.
I have heard of him.
He's got like 4 verses in Acts chapter 20, but he's a hero.
Well, that's a great hero. Can I just say, does that include guitar solos and choruses that go on and on and on?
You might say that. I couldn't possibly comment. Yeah, whatever it is. My generation in the church, I'm mid-60s now, we have been gifted with the most incredible communicators, fantastic communicators, and we have invested them nearly all into talking to ourselves. My generation in the church has talked itself almost to death, and we have completely failed in the business of going outside the church to meet the people outside where they are. So if you want to buy a Christian magazine, we got them. If you want to have a Christian podcast, we got them. Music, whatever, conferences, whatever. But all of it, or nearly all of it, in an enclosed, sealed off space that really means very little to people on the outside of the church. So my ambition is to follow Eutychus and follow Paul, go outside the church and see if we can find those people there.
Question 2. If you were Prime Minister for the day and could change any law or impose new law, what would it be?
Well, I'd quite like to repeal the law of gravity because it'd be quite fun to be able to float about the place.
Yeah.
But on a slightly less frivolous note, I would like on day one, I would ban all illuminated advertising. Any advert that's got a light to light it up, and you see them all over the place now, because we are wasting so much energy and power and electricity, which is a finite resource. Everybody trying to illuminate their adverts so that theirs stands out more than the rest. If we switch them all off together on day one, it would remove all the competition. So that would seem to me to make a big impact on the environment there. You have that idea for free, whoever you are who's going to be the next Prime Minister.
Well, that's a very good idea. At football matches, it's really annoying, actually, when you're watching a game, even on TV, and all you can see are the illuminated LED signboards.
Yeah, there's no need for it.
No, there isn't. Well said. Well, we'll do something about that. As soon as you get in, sort it out.
I mean, I have stood for Parliament on more than one occasion. I stood for the Westminster Parliament way back, 20 years ago now, but didn't get elected. And I also stood for the European Parliament and didn't get elected there either.
But you've had a go, which is something, more than most of us have done.
Yeah, and it's a fascinating business, and you have to be incredibly committed to it. Even if you don't think you're going to win, it takes an enormous amount of time and effort and energy to stand for Parliament. But it just takes you to places that you don't ordinarily get to. And in terms of kind of going outside the normal kind of Christian circles, that works for me. So I won't stand again because I'm a bit too old for it now.
Not if you're Republican or Democrat in America, you're not that old.
No.
I haven't got the stamina, and I certainly haven't got the strength to take criticism. If I stood as an MP, couldn't do it. But if I was the campaign manager, for a month, that'd be quite fun, would have thought.
Yeah.
When you were trying yourself to do this, how well did you get on with the other candidates?
Oh, pretty well on the whole. Certainly when I was standing as an MP, or to be an MP, the other candidates were generally kind of friendly and cooperative. When I stood for the European Parliament, I was standing against a man called Tommy Robinson, who is a far-right activist. And although I did speak to him a little bit and offer to meet with him privately, I wouldn't say I got on with him very well because he was in his own little world. On the whole, people standing for Parliament and people working in Parliament tend to get on well. They're in the same ballpark.
Of course, you and Tommy Robinson do have something in common. You both support the Hatters. That's a football thing.
Different Hatters.
But yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that. Let's go to the next question. Outside of family events, Andrew, what has been your most enjoyable day out so far, please?
It's not quite a day out, but my happy place, the place where I fit best and where my soul works, is a festival called Greenbelt, which takes place every August bank holiday. And I've been going to the Greenbelt Festival for, almost since it began, which is more than 50 years ago. And Greenbelt is a festival of faith and arts and activism. So you'll find music, you'll find discussion about issues of faith and politics, and you'll find comedy and theatre and art of all sorts. And one of the joys of Greenbelt is that it's extremely inclusive, that people of all sorts can go there. Nobody says, well, you have to sign up to this particular doctrine or this particular tradition or whatever, or you have to be this or that. Whoever you are, you'll find another half a dozen people just like you at Greenbelt. So that's my happiest place, where I enjoy myself most.
I have to say, it was quite funny as you were talking, this tail went past you on the screen.
I'm sharing the room with Missy, the Ridgeback dog, so she may make herself known along the way. She's curled up in a chair quite comfortably at the moment, but she might join in a bit.
Yeah, that'd be brilliant. Next question. What's been your most embarrassing moment to date, please, sir?
Oh dear, do I have to?
Yes.
Right, a few years back I moved into a new house in a very posh area that I wasn't really used to. We'd come from a bit of a downtown area, and there was my wife and I and the kids and our pet dog, our previous dog. And on moving day, the moving van was there and things were being taken in and out the front door, and we weren't really very conscious of where the dog was. The dog was kind of exploring, I suppose. And then when the day came to an end and the removal people had met, we thought, oh, where's the dog? And we heard a scratching at the door, opened the door, and there was our dog outside our new house with a rabbit dead in its mouth. And after we'd inquired around a bit, we worked out that the dog had gone out and got the neighbour's pet rabbit. And so I had to go around to our brand new neighbours in this posh area with a cardboard box saying, hello, I'm your new neighbour, and this in the box, this is your ex-rabbit. And that was pretty embarrassing.
And what happened?
They took a little while to forgive us, but they did eventually, and we got on fine after that.
But at least you did the right thing to go around and try and explain. For those that are saying, normally, Martin, your first question is if you can invite anybody from history from the evening meal, alive or dead, so you can ask them questions, who would it be? But you left it to the end. There's a reason for that. What's your answer, please, good sir?
Well, the reason is that I've spent the last 10 years of my life getting inside the head of one particular person, a man called John Smyth. John Smyth was a barrister in the UK in the 1970s and the early 80s. He was a high-profile figure. He was involved in a thing called the Nationwide Festival of Light. He worked alongside Mary Whitehouse, who was a Christian campaigner at the time. He was her lawyer. And he was a keen evangelical Christian, and he was involved, amongst other things, in a series of Christian camps called Ewan Camps, of which he was the chair. In the course of my journalistic work, I discovered that John Smyth, apart from being a high-profile Christian barrister, was also a serial child abuser who had been grooming young men from these camps and from top universities, and he would take them back to his house in Winchester, where he would beat them until they bled. He would say, in the name of Jesus. And one way or another, I found out about what John Smyth had done and realised that I needed to make this story known, really, partly for the sake of his victims, partly because I was so enraged by the hypocrisy of the man who had preached and persecuted gay Christians and others, all the while abusing these young men in terrible ways. And partly also because he was still alive. He'd moved to Africa, and as far as I knew, he might still be abusing people there and needed to be stopped. What had happened was that way back in 1982, some of the young men who he'd abused in the UK had spoken out very bravely and had gone to some of their church leaders and told them what was happening. And instead of stopping it, the church leaders got together and decided this must be hushed up, and they hustled John Smyth off to Africa, where he started camps of his own, where he abused many more and much younger children. I discovered this about 10 years ago, slightly over 10 years ago now, and I have spent a large part of that time investigating his life, his motivation, and the closest I got to him was that I went to South Africa, where he was living, and went to his house. I went to his house every day for several weeks to see if I could invite him to talk to me. I left messages. I phoned. At one point, I just parked my car outside his house and waited. And he did eventually come out of the house, but he scuttled off into the distance and didn't want to speak. So that's as close as I ever got to actually meeting him. But having spent 10 years of my life inside someone else's head, I would love to invite him round. He's dead now. I'd love to invite him round to sit down and say, John, why did you do this? What corrupted your Christian faith in such a profound way that you were able to abuse well over 100 boys and young men? And to ask him the things I would have asked him if I'd managed to catch him in South Africa, which is, would you not like to come and see if we could be reconciled to some of the people whose lives you've damaged? That's not going to happen now because he's died, although I'm still in touch with and on good terms with his family. But what that did was, I managed to bring that story into public attention in 2017 through some news reports with Channel 4 News, and I've since written a book about it, Bleeding for Jesus, and made 2 recent documentaries. As I began to meet up with the people who had been harmed by John Smyth, I started to think, well, it's my Christian responsibility not just to tell this story like a journalist, but also to walk with these people as best I can to try and help them find ways forward. So I started to do that. And as I did that, we're talking about nearly 10 years ago now, the more I did that, the more other people who had been harmed in the life of the church began to find their way to me and say, can I tell you about what's happened to me?
Mm-hmm.
And can you help me find a way forward? Until that has become basically what I do with my days now. That is, I walk with people who've been harmed in the life of the church. It's not what I expected. It's not what I signed up for when I left school.
No.
Or even when I joined the church.
No.
But it's what I spend my life on now.
We did have a brief chat beforehand. I said, well, this is what I'd like to talk about, because I don't really want to discuss the John Smyth incident, because I'd rather people buy the book, or if all else fails, go onto Channel 4 website and pick up the 2-part documentary there.
The documentary is called See No Evil, for those who are interested.
It is. But in our conversation, you were very kind and you understood where I'm coming from because of what's going on behind the scenes with me, with my wife's ill health and family.
Yeah.
And you said the word struggle.
Yeah.
And I thought, that's a great word.
Yeah.
So I would think that people listening to this podcast today are struggling in whatever forms of life they have.
Yeah.
2 questions. First of all, I'd like you to tell me what you think the word struggle means from a Christian perspective.
Yeah.
And then from a point of view, when you were going through this, what struggles you felt mentally, physically and spiritually looking into the darkness that was going on there.
I mean, I think when I was growing up, I was given the idea that basically Christianity and its living out in the life of the church was basically a happy and joyful thing. In fact, I was kind of told by the people who brought me to Christ that if you want a joyful life, then you need to be a Christian. In the last 10 years, I have seen so much darkness in the life of the church. Every day now, I listen to people who have been harmed in the church, people who have been bullied, people who have been women who've been raped by clergy, people who've been terribly abused and whose lives have been horrendously affected by it. And I found myself thinking, thinking lots of things, but thinking, is this inevitable in the life of the church? Is it just part of the deal? Is there something about Christian faith or the church itself which is intrinsically abusive? So we have to come to terms with the idea that Christian faith is not inevitably or completely joyful, doesn't sort our lives out, that it's full of pain and struggle, and some bits just don't seem to work. And throughout my Christian life and my life as an evangelical Christian, the answer to that, broadly speaking, from the church has been sing louder, sing another chorus, drown out the harm and the hurting. Sometimes even to blame people outside the church, to say, well, it's outside the church that the harm comes from. In here, it's fine. But I know that it's not. I know that within the church there is cruelty and there's bullying, and there's, of course, there's goodness and there's love and there's kindness as well. But the struggle is exactly that, trying to reconcile those two things. It's not only the life of the church either, because I think you have to look at Christian faith itself and say there's a lot of violence, a lot of harm, and a lot of struggle rooted in Christian faith. Take an honest read through the Bible and see just how much God, our God, the Christian God, seems to encourage people to harm each other, and how much cruelty there is. So the struggle is, I believe in a good God and a loving God and a God of grace, but a lot of the evidence from the Bible and a lot of the evidence from the church is that God allows, sometimes even encourages, cruelty and harm. How do we hold that together? How do you hold together the suffering and the hope? When I talk about struggle, that's what I mean. I'm essentially a very, very hopeful person. I'm a great believer in the fact that this world's story is going to end well and that God has it in hand. But in the meantime, it's blooming dark.
Yeah. But I think what you've just put so eloquently as to this is what the Bible says. I've never been to university to study theology. I've never been to university full stop. You have. You call yourself an academic theologian. So there must be an answer to that question that you raised about why does God allow this, not suffering so much, but all the cruelty that you see in the Bible. So what is your answer in the Janet and John language, please, for me to understand?
Well, Martin, you say there must be an answer, but that's to make the assumption that all of this adds up and that there's a good solution. And if only we could look at the back of the book, like I used to look at the back of my maths book where the answers were.
Yeah.
If only we could look at the back of the book, we'd find how it all adds up. But maybe it doesn't. There's no guarantee. For some people, Christian faith is about believing that God is good, even when the evidence doesn't look like it.
Mm-hmm.
There's a slogan that I keep hearing around certain sorts of churches where somebody shouts out, God is good all the time, and the crowd shout back all the time, God is good. And I want to say, are you sure? Because it doesn't look like that a lot of the time. Are you just trying to, as I was saying earlier, shout louder to drown out the facts? Or can we actually look at the depth of the suffering and the struggle and the pain that there is in the world and in the church, and somehow in that struggling and pain and suffering find Jesus? Could it be that the place where Jesus is hiding is actually in the wounds of the world? And that if we allow ourselves to sit with that pain, to look deeply into those wounds, that's where we find Jesus. That's the struggle for me.
Yeah, I would have thought for many people listening today who are struggling with this very concept, well, how can God say he's a loving God? I can't see that.
Yeah.
But you still maintained your Christian faith. So what keeps you going?
Well, those two beliefs. One, that the real Jesus is to be found not floating above the world, but deep in the wounds and the pain of the world. And so when I meet with people who've been harmed in the church, I'm meeting with Jesus. So that belief keeps me going, but it's a draining thing and a costly thing. And also the belief, and this is a choice to believe, a choice to hope, that the world's story ends well. So in the promises of God, in the Christian story, there is this truth that the end of all of this will be good, that God will remake the heavens and the earth, and that it will end well. And that's a choice to believe that. And if somebody doesn't choose to believe that, I can quite understand that, but I choose to believe that.
So for those that are listening at this very moment in time, holding on by their fingernails, maybe because they just can't comprehend the idea of a loving God, whether it be for what they're going through personally, or for instance, that there's so much trouble in the world, how can God be God?
Yeah.
Whatever hurt they're feeling and the struggle they're going through, a very simple sentence from you, good sir. What would you like to say to them?
I would say Jesus is closer than you think when you are hurting most. Maybe don't look for the joyful Jesus of the choruses, but look for the Jesus who suffers on the cross and understands pain and understands betrayal and disappointment and being let down by the community that he formed. And I would hope and pray that you would find at least one Christian person who would just come right alongside you and enter into that struggle with you and not try to explain it away or sanctify it somehow, but just be there and walk with you.
I'd like to see now from yourself how you coped in this. And I'll give you an example because I love watching movies. I've watched films about, say, Watergate when I was growing up and seeing All the President's Men, the film, the journalist doing it. Erin Brockovich, what a film that is. Go on, Erin, go for it. And I would have thought from you, when you first heard that story about this John Smyth character, you might feel, right, I'm really going to go for this. I'm going to get my journalistic hat on. I'm going to get my pen and paper out. I'm going to do the notes. But you're also a Christian and you're then going into the dark, deeper world and you're thinking, why hasn't the church reacted to this?
Yeah.
So what were you feeling at the time and how did it affect you?
Well, I was feeling very compromised and confused, and I took a long time to work out what I was supposed to do because these were my people, not just John Smyth, but also the networks that he was part of, the evangelical Christian network, particularly in the Church of England, and the organizations. These were people I knew and I'd grown up with and have shaped and formed me as a Christian. And a part of my feeling was, if I tell this story, if I put it out there, it's going to do immense damage to the church, to the reputation of the church. And in fact, it led eventually to the resignation of the Archbishop of Canterbury, I think the first Archbishop ever to resign under those sorts of circumstances. And I suppose, I had to go through the process that I'm sure that those other church leaders went through when they first heard about John Smyth, which is saying, well, is it going to be best if actually nobody ever hears about this and we just shuffle him off somehow? But I'm also a believer in truth coming out, truth being important. And the response has been different from different people, even amongst the victims of John Smyth. There are victims of John Smyth who have said, I wish you'd never told this story. I wish you'd just shut up and let me get on with my life and try and, put all that happened to me in a box and sit on it. And there are other victims of John Smyth who've said, I've carried this with me for 35 years and now I can put it down. So if you know that you're going to cause so much harm and as well as healing, I guess it feels a bit like, I don't know, you feel a bit like a surgeon who has a patient lying in front of him and says, well, I can cut out your tumour and take it out. But in doing so, I'm going to have to make you bleed and I'm going to cut through nerves and I'm going to cut through blood vessels and I'm going to do a huge amount of damage. But in the end, it will be a healing thing for you, but it's never cut and dried. So I have had and still have all those dilemmas. And I now know things about the church and about things that have happened in the church and things that some very senior church leaders have done that if they came out would cause immense damage.
That's the thing, isn't it? When do you say, right, enough is enough, I can't do any more? So what do you do? Well,
in most of those cases, the reason why I'm not able to speak yet about those things that I know are because the victims and survivors are not yet ready to do that. And they always have to be the most important people for me. But I don't think the church should be a place that collects power or where secrets are hidden. I don't think it's the job of a church leader to somehow try and defend the reputation of the church or the reputation of God. It's the truth that we want, not the management of reputations.
See, I'm glad it wasn't me writing the book. And I tell you why, it wouldn't be a good read anyway. It'd be all over the place. So that's to your credit. But also, as I said, I'm really, really bad at taking any form of criticism, especially when it's subjective. I can't cope with that. So you've had to deal with that.
Yeah.
But also in the written word, when you read it, the way you write it might be actually translated in the person that's reading it in a totally different manner.
Yeah.
So the way you're speaking to me at the moment is fantastic. I can see a real humble guy in front of me sharing things. You can hear the heart in what you're saying, but that can't often be translated into the word.
Yeah. So some people from that constituency have hated the book that I've written and the work that I've done and won't send me Christmas cards anymore. But other people, I think, have found some relief or some truth or whatever. And hence my commitment to walking with those people so that I'm not just kind of throwing a hand grenade into the church and then running away. I'm part of it. I'm still part of a church, a little church up in Manchester. I don't think I could be part of an Anglican church anymore because I know too much. But I'm part of a little local church of people who are wonderful and loving and utterly chaotic and so disorganized that I don't think they could do much harm, really. It's when the church gets itself organized, and particularly when it has access to power, that it can do a lot of harm. I think big churches, intrinsically harmful, and Christian celebrity, Christian big leadership, intrinsically harmful.
In what way?
Well, as soon as you build a big church, you build a sort of cathedral or a warehouse or whatever it is, and you create a lot of dark corners by doing that. And it's in the dark corners that abuse can happen. As soon as you give people a powerful role in a church, you're asking them to value the church and the role and the future of it and its reputation very, very highly, and sometimes to value that more than the truth itself. And you put a lot of temptation in people's way when they have power in the church or when they have a lot of money. I don't think the church was made to be big. And I think that in the current age that we're in, God is humbling the church, bringing us back to something smaller, less powerful, less influential in the state. And I don't think we should fight that. All the talk about, we must make sure the church grows and we want more people to be church leaders and all of this. I don't think so. I think God is calling us to a smaller, more local, more humble church. And I'm up for that.
Yeah. I want to go a bit further. And this isn't a dig at you. Please don't think I'm trying to
dig
be
away, Martin. You're welcome.
Well, thank you. I will then, but I don't want to be one of these investigative journalists trying to get a story out of it. There is a bigger picture here. And the problem with social media now is you can just type in the name Andrew Graystone and immediately all these stories come up. Now, it's funny this because something you just said, I'm going to relate to, goes back about 4 years. And there are a couple of people who've gone onto the website or made a website for themselves in light of your book to say, oh, yes, but Andrew Graystone never did this. He never contacted me.
Yeah.
He never went for the information to find what happened. And I, for instance, never played golf with this bloke.
Yeah.
That sort of thing.
Yeah.
So how do you cope yourself when all these accusations, maybe they are factual, come back at you? And then, of course, when we read your reply, I'm reading it in the same sort of voice that the first person wrote about you.
Yeah.
I don't get a true picture. So how do you cope?
One of the tricky things about being an independent journalist is that your resources are quite limited. So it is quite possible that I've got some things wrong. And I've been very fortunate to be able to write a second edition of my book 5 years later when there was much more information available and was able to kind of correct one or two things that I'd said wrongly in the first edition. But nobody's sued me.
Good point.
Nobody's said, you've done me harm by telling lies about me. I understand that people whose whole worldview and his whole kind of the shape of their Christian faith has been shaken. Some of them are going to be angry or disturbed or just not know what to do. And, the villain in all of this really is John Smyth, but John Smyth is no longer there to hang. So I understand that I am going to take a kicking from some people, and you have to kind of decide that that's okay. People have a right to disagree, to have a go, and that there are other people who are struggling too besides me. And I realized that in the work that I've done in the last few years, there has been a challenge to really some fundamental things that have shaped people's character and personality. And out of their struggle, there'll be some anger. And if I pick up some of that anger, so be it.
Wow. Well, I have to say, it's amazing what you're saying, first of all. Secondly, to challenge is another thing. It's also how you then challenge and how you do it and how you do it in love.
Yeah.
I'll give you an example of this because it was like a table tennis match for me.
Yeah.
One person was saying something about you and then you counter it with another nice forehand back.
Yeah.
But I'm obviously reading it in a voice that isn't yours because I hadn't spoken to you before. And the point that you made, I think if I reread it again now, I could read it in love.
Yeah.
Because I think it was more than a valid comment that you made, which was basically, well, if you had bothered to speak up about this 30 years ago, maybe this wouldn't have happened as a result of it.
Yeah.
So how do you challenge in love and say something like to somebody who's still hurting and grieving?
The challenge, I think, is to stay close to people and not just kind of throw stones and run away, and to remain vulnerable and to try to remain humble as people work out what's happened. Let me give you a silly example.
Please.
I spend a fair amount of time going to court now, and what tends to happen is that if some victim of abuse has managed to go to the civil criminal courts and take their abuser to trial, that's a very difficult process for that individual to go through, and often very time consuming and extremely distressing. So having someone to go with you and walk along with you can be really helpful. I was in court last month for the trial of an abuser called the Reverend Jonathan Fletcher, who was a key figure in the Ewan Camps movement and the evangelical movement, particularly in the Church of England over many years. He's still alive, although he has dementia now. And I found myself sitting in the court with people he had hurt, and also people who'd been his spiritual mentor and also members of his family. And that is not a comfortable place to be. But
No.
the important thing is to show up and be there and not run away. And to, if you make mistakes, own your mistakes, but be there in the dark places as well as the happy ones.
In light of what you said about being there with them, you made a little statement earlier on when you were talking about the family of John Smyth, and you're still in touch with them now.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Tell me more about that, please.
I mean, I won't tell you personal stuff about them.
No, obviously not.
At one level, whoever feels that they have been damaged by the revelations that I've made about John Smyth, for instance, nobody has been harmed or as close to it as his wife and his kids. And they could very well have just been plain angry at the things that I was exposing about their father. But actually, in truth, they've been incredibly honest and brave in facing up to what he did and the influence that it's had on them. And they have chosen to allow me, to some extent, to walk alongside them in that. Then that's a huge privilege. I'm not harmed by, I don't consider myself a victim of abuse personally in the church or anywhere else. But people who have grown up with a father who is now a kind of icon of abuse, that's huge in their lives. And to be able to still stand with them is a massive privilege. And I have to say, you know, some of the people who've been most critical of what I've done there, through John Smyth, have not been that great at supporting or standing with those who have been harmed, and have been more worried about their own reputations. And yeah, so it's a choice to be vulnerable, really.
I hear that. Well, the fact that you're getting deeper and deeper into this darkness surrounding John Smyth and the vulnerability that's coming towards you.
Yeah.
How did you personally cope with all this baggage that must be thrust upon you, and that you knew you had to get it out there?
Yeah, and still does. You know, I will talk to people today after I've spoken to you. I will, without doubt, listen to people who've been terribly harmed in the life of the church.
Yeah.
And I don't find it particularly easy. No, it's made a big impact on my life. If you think of your soul as a saucepan, by the time I was 20, the saucepan was shiny and perfect. And now the saucepan of my soul is pretty battered and dented and burnt on the bottom. But that's okay. And as I said before, I have this hope that one day God is going to renew all the battered and broken things. And that, I hope, will include me.
Yeah.
When my wife and I go to the supermarket, you know that bit of the supermarket, the shelf where they put all the stuff with the yellow stickers on?
Yes.
All the stuff that's going out of date, or the tins that have been dented, or the boxes that have half spilled and they've been done up with sellotape and they stick a yellow sticker on them and sell them off cheap. Well, my wife and I call that section the church. So we go to the supermarket and she came home yesterday and she said, "I got your lunch from the church." And what she meant was not that she'd been up to the soup kitchen, but that she'd been in the supermarket and she picked up some things from the remainders section. And we call it the church because that's where all the broken and beaten up and past their sell-by date items people collect together and find a new, renewed purpose, find that they're not useless as they probably thought they were. So that's the church. And once I accidentally went to the guy in the supermarket, and where you normally ask, "Can you tell me where the tomato sauce is?" I said to him, "Can you tell me where the church is, please?" And he looked at me completely, what? Yeah.
I know one particular Christian high up in the media who would come home every night having been lambasted by various sectors.
Yeah.
And basically his wife would listen, dust him down and kick him out the door the following day.
Yeah.
So what support group, along with your wife, did you have whereby they're not going to own your problems, but they're going to make sure that you're okay?
I don't have a support group as such, although I do have some lovely Christian friends. I'm meeting some of them tonight. My kids live nearby. They're grown up now, but they don't take me seriously, and that helps. I mean, above all, I'm not the one with the scars. You know, whoever I listen to or talk to, I'm not the one who was violated. So whatever it is for me, it's harder for them. It's always harder for them.
It is. But also, I'm just trying to make sure that for those that are listening and thinking, well, I've got all this stuff inside me, I don't want to go around thinking, well, I've now got to own it myself. I can't share it.
Yeah.
There needs to be a release. And I would have thought that your wife must have been that person that would dust you down and make sure that you're okay so that you can be, for want of a better word, an activist to do the stuff to bring it to light.
Yeah. We're very much a team, Jane and I, and we don't do things that the other wouldn't approve of, although we don't do the same things all the time. So yeah, there can be a lot of support in family, but sometimes family is where the abuse is, where the hurt is. I wouldn't take for granted that family is the comforting place for everybody. Mm-hmm. There are other ways. There are friends. There are some churches are very good at supporting, but in the end, I guess you have to take what you are to God. And as I was saying earlier, I think even when you take the dark stuff to Jesus, you see Jesus' eyes light up. Because Jesus says, hey, yeah, I know about the dark stuff. I've been there. I've seen that. Let me just turn down the volume on all these praises and joy songs that people are singing for me so that I can sit and listen to the hurt that you found.
When I'm feeling bad, and it's quite often, a lot of times, I remember the Tony Campolo part. Someone goes to heaven and Jesus is there. And she said, did you clothe the poor? Did you feed the hungry? Did you look after the sick? And the person said, no, but I went to church every Sunday and held a Bible study group every Wednesday night. Yeah. What is your motivation? What do you think God will say to you and Jesus say to you on the pearly gates front?
I think Jesus will say, you can put it down now. Just come in and have a rest. Here's an ice cream. You can put it down now. I'll take this one.
Very quickly, before we find out who your Christian hero is, and I thank you so much for what you've shared and the way you've shared it. It really does mean a lot to me.
Oh, it's been really interesting, Martin. It's not gone the way that either of us particularly thought, but they're the best ones, aren't they?
Well, they are. Especially as I had all these questions, and I loved the bit about your book, Faith, Hope and Mischief, Tiny Acts of Rebellion by an Everyday Activist.
That's even got jokes in it.
Apparently so. Christians are allowed to have humour, apparently.
Yeah. I love comedy. Comedy is one of the places that I go for to kind of download, really. I love comedy, and we're in such a great age of comedy at the moment.
In what way?
Comedy is such an important part of contemporary culture in Britain and in particular. And we've got a kind of rich vein of really talented comedians.
More of observation though now, isn't it?
Yeah, a lot of that, yeah. There's not so many mother-in-law jokes and and all of that.
And there are some Christians as well, doing very well, thank you, on the comedy front.
There are some Christian comedians, yeah. But Christian is not a very good adjective. So I don't really recognise a line between like Christian comedy and non-Christian comedy, or Christian music and non-Christian music, or Christian love and non-Christian love. Christian doesn't work very well as an adjective like that. It's either good or it's not good.
Would it be a glib thing to say that we should maybe drop the word Christian and say we're a follower of Jesus instead, as some people do?
Yeah, I'd buy that. Yeah.
Why?
Because Christian is a kind of social construct. It's Christianity as a religion, like all religions, is something that human beings have made and created to wrap up their beliefs and their practices. And as we wrapped up the whole kind of Christian parcel, we included some stuff that probably didn't belong in there. So yeah, we just need to ask who and what you are following and shaping your life on, rather than how high up you've got in the church or whatever.
Two last questions. The last one obviously being who your Christian hero is. Here's the penultimate question. As you know, if you've been listening to previous podcasts, I've bought myself a time machine off eBay. It hasn't turned up yet, but it will do. It'll be here.
It'll come. I mean, are you sure it hasn't turned up? Because if it's a time machine, it may have turned up years ago.
I hadn't thought of that. That's a great point. Thank you. I will look into that. I'll get out my receipts and see what the invoices say. Let's just say it turns up now.
Yeah.
Okay. And I put you in there and we go all the way back to when you were a 20-year-old, when you were this nice, clean, pristine saucepan.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, it might have been a cheap Sainsbury's one. It might have been a really expensive one that you can buy somewhere else. Whatever. It's a saucepan. Nice, clean, pristine.
Yeah.
I'll take you back. What are you going to say to this nice 20-year-old person from your age now as to what's going to happen?
Yeah, nobody has ever asked me before, what are you going to say to your saucepan? But that's a good question.
It can pan out. There's a pun there.
I am going to say, forget about any idea about career. Doesn't work like that. Forget about security. You're not really going to have that. That girl over there in the blue top, hang on to her. She's going to be great. You won't believe it, but you'll still be with her in 40 years. And I suppose on a more serious note, I'm going to say...
Actually, that's important, I think. That one.
One foot in front of the other. Stick with Jesus. There's a story that there was an old Christian when I was growing up, a woman called Corrie ten Boom, who was a well-known Christian figure who had grown up in the war, and she used to tell a story. She used to say, when I was a child and I was going on a long train journey, my dad never gave us the ticket until just before we had to get on the train. And she was saying it, she said it better than me, but she was saying, you don't actually know what God is going to do with you until just before, but that'll be okay. Just trust and that'll be okay.
Brilliant answer. Thank you. Well, I'm glad that the saucepan was hopefully listening to what you said. Thank you. Well, Andrew, what an amazing conversation about struggle and what you've been through, and I thank you so much for what you've shared. Just remains for me now for a drum roll, please, and to say, Andrew Graystone, who is your Christian hero, please?
My Christian hero, and I've thought about this long and hard, my Christian hero is my grandfather.
Brilliant. I love these.
My grandfather, he lived in the house next door to us, so I knew him very well growing up. I used to go, come home from school, go round to his house, and we would talk about what had happened through the day. And he was incredibly faithful. He was a faithful Christian. There's only one place he was going to be on a Sunday, and he was committed to his church and to his faith. After he died, I went into his house to help kind of clear it out, and there was this chest of drawers, and I opened it, and in the top drawer there were Bible reading notes that he'd read through daily, year after year after year, and the next drawer down, more of them, and the next drawer down, more of them. He had been just faithful in simple things like Bible reading and praying for decades, and he was faithful to me too. When I went off to university, every single week I'd go to my pigeonhole, there'd be a letter from my grandfather asking about me and telling me what he'd done. But one of the core things that I think I learned from him was that although he was very conservative in pretty much every way, he was over the years able to change and adapt in his Christian faith and to work out how to apply it to the world around him. So, I mean, in his lifetime, he saw practically the invention of the car, certainly the aeroplane, and so much changed for him. But he was prepared to change with it, but remained faithful at the core to Jesus. So that makes him a bit of a hero for me.
And what was his name?
Stanley. That's not a name you get very often. Stanley Lidelow. Yeah, and I mean, credit to his wife, my grandmother, Kathleen, as well. But Stanley Lidelow was kind of wise, quiet, and faithful all his life long.
Wow. I love answers like that. Andrew Graystone, thank you so much for joining us today. Seriously, it's been an amazing privilege. I didn't know where this podcast was going to go.
That's the fun of it, Martin.
And that's the way it should be.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Cheers. God bless. And should you wish to contact Andrew in light of the podcast, please write an email to us using the address ogc@accessradio.biz, and in the subject heading, please write for the attention of Andrew Graystone. I will then forward them on to him and he can contact you accordingly. And if you haven't already hit the like, subscribe or notification button, please do. Now, the next season of Off-Grid Christianity will commence on Friday, 4th of September. However, during our summer break, there will be another chance to hear classic episodes from 180 and counting podcasts, the first of which is episode 93 with John Woodhouse, the Major General to Her Majesty's Land Forces in 2008. My wife and I listened to it again last week. It was as if I hadn't heard it before. I was the interviewer. Have a lovely summer holiday. Enjoy the classic podcasts, and we'll catch up with you again for a new episode from Friday, the 4th of September. Until then, cheerio.